Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you are all well. You amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. You're looking absolutely amazing today. I thought I would do a third video, as the other videos earlier today were kind of snippets from last night's live, which was the initial reaction to the news as it came out. What news? I hear you say. Of course I don't. You know what news we're talking about. And that is that apparently Bryan Kohberger, the defense, approached the prosecution with basically a plea deal, and the prosecution have accepted it, seemingly claiming that they've accepted it to spare the families further upset and trauma, which we'll get into. But first of all, because the families have kicked the fuck off, and not just the ones that you think, not just Steve Gonsalves. No, other families have also reacted to it in a less than positive way. So let's first of all just look at the hearing, because it has now been confirmed in a document, which I find this bizarre, right? Because it says that this document was filed at 2:45 p.m. Yesterday, and it didn't come out until about 2 hours ago. And if you look at this doc, which has appeared all day and was actually in there yesterday, this was filed only like 3 hours, 4 hours before. So it's a bit weird that it didn't come to light in the actual docket until today. And instead, how do we hear about it? Through Poxy Media again. None other than Brian Peter Pan. Sorry, he's just tiny. Through media again. Fucking News Nation of all people. They're the people who are the antagonists of this information, and it's like, why is it that we can't hear things from the horse's mouth? We're hearing from the monkey, not the organ grinder. But 11 a.m. Ada County is the hearing. There is limited information on that, and if we actually go on to the actual summary, there isn't anything yet on here, so everything seems to be a little bit delayed. I'd probably sack their secretary or whoever's supposed to be updating this, because there's nothing in there yet. So I don't know whether this is going to be public or whether it's going to be sealed. We can kind of guess that it's more than likely going to be sealed. But then again, I'm kind of 50-50, because ultimately they should just be speaking about this subject. So it should be a change of plea. But what else could be there? What could potentially mean that this hearing is indeed going to be sealed? And let's just talk about that quickly. Now, some people they've asked whether this could be an Alford plea. Now, an Alford plea, for those of you who don't know, is basically where the defence turns around and says, look, we're not admitting to doing it, but we are admitting to the fact that the evidence is so overwhelming that we're going to have a fucking struggle getting around it, and we're likely going to be found guilty. And this is something that I touched on briefly yesterday in the live, and we have spoke about previously, that if there was going to be a plea, you could almost argue that an Alford plea was going to be the one that you could half expect. Because, if Bryan Kohberger can't prove his alibi in 2.5 years, then the likelihood is he can't prove fuck all now. So it's just pulling away at the strings of the circumstantial case that we've seen. Now, there might be more, who knows? All I'm ever going by is what is in the public arena, and even though people seem to struggle with that concept of trying to protect the constitutional rights of an American citizen, that just goes fucking way above their head. They don't understand it. They're more wanting to be right, and now they're having their little parties because they feel that they've gained some kind of affirmation, and it sometimes means that they can be up on their ivory towers. But look, it is what it is. But an Alford plea, I don't think this is going to be an Alford plea. Now, we do have to creep over into the realms of what does that look like inside the courtroom. Now, it could be that Judge Hippler turns around and he doesn't accept it. He could throw it out. Is that likely? I don't think so, because he's always sided with the prosecution up to now. So if the prosecution seem to be happy to go along with it, then he's more than likely going to side with them and accept it. But what he could do is force Bryan Kohberger to speak more on the case itself and force him to give specific details in order to satisfy his curiosity that, look, he is indeed the person who did it and he hasn't been coerced, or, there's nothing going on in the background, who will want him to actually, say, yes, this is what I did, and this is why I did it, perhaps. I don't know whether it would go into the intricacies of the crime itself, the methodology of the murders, but it could indeed be that Judge Hitler forces Bryan Kohberger to at least tell him, why did you do it? What was the reasoning behind it? We as humans, I think a large majority of people wanted to know, even if they thought that Bryan Kohberger was innocent, if they then felt that it was going to find out that he was guilty, they'd want to know why he did it. What was the reason behind? Now we can all guess. The people who turn around and say he was an incel, this, that, and the other, but the type of crime that it was, and the things that we'll get into the weeds on that in another video. The actual crime itself and what that means if Bryan Kohberger, if he's indeed the person who done it, which everything seems to be pointing to the fact that he is indeed guilty and he's accepting of that. Now, we can skirt around that as much as we like, but I don't think an innocent person would accept a plea unless there was something going on in the background, family being threatened, or he felt that he needed to do this to protect himself in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. And again, I know we're going into the realms of a non-acceptance of something that looks so blatant, and that is that he's just decided that he can't fucking fight what's against him. The struggle is that what we've seen, we can sort of look at it from a distance. It just doesn't look enough. But then some people will say just the Amazon purchase on its own is enough. And maybe that's what he's considered. Maybe he was just a fucking idiot and he did all these things. Who knows? But the families aren't happy. And this is when we go into the realms of these. We'll first of all touch on Xana's family, which is over here, which gives you a bit of a shorter insight into how this all came about. Because it says, we spoke to Kim. She was on a conference call with prosecutors, she says. Prosecutors told her the defense approached prosecutors with a plea deal, and the prosecution went along to spare the families the pain of a trial. Kim says that's ridiculous. Now, Kim is Xana Kanodel's auntie, by the way. Look, the family of Xana Kanodel is livid over the plea deal offered to accused murderer Bryan Kohberger, and they told prosecutors they had better not dare go through with it. Kim Kanodel, Xana's aunt, who was so furious she was in tears, tells TMZ prosecutors floated the idea of a plea deal a few days ago, and the family made it clear, no way. So it's quite funny that there seems to have been some kind of conversation, because the prosecutors have floated the idea with the parents and sort of said, what if a plea deal come along? How would you feel about it? And they've said, fuck no. And lo and behold, now they go back to him and say, well, that idea we floated with you the other day. Well, it just so happens that the defense have in fact now come to us and they've said that they would like a plea deal in order to take the death penalty off the table. And Kim has turned around and said that's ridiculous, because at least two of the families, hers and the Gonsalves family, who we'll get to in a second, wanted Kohberger to face a jury. What she actually meant, that wanted Kohberger dead. That's pretty clear. I don't think any of us could argue that. I don't think we need to argue that. Says Kim says prosecutors were especially concerned that the families would have to see the gruesome crime scene photos of their loved ones, but she says we know the graphics. They were not trying to spare us. They've been told what happened. They know. Kim also says when her family got a call from prosecutors a few days ago about a deal, they were vague. Prosecutors never mentioned taking the death penalty off the table. What's especially puzzling, Kim says, prosecutors told her there was enough evidence to secure a guilty verdict, which is something that's on our mind. And I touched on this earlier today in the video, that it's what went wrong. It just doesn't make sense to me. You've either got a real strong case and you think, fuck him. Do you know what I mean? This is a state. We believe in the death penalty. This is a heinous crime. He deserves to die. We've just got the guns ready. Let's have him. Let's have him in there and execute the fucker. Because now, how can you go forward and execute anybody else if you're not even willing to execute this guy? There you go. I've always said if he was guilty of it, then this is one crime that does stand up against the death penalty. And the death penalty in the US is something that I've been interested in since I was 16 years old. But, so if there's such a strong case that they can bury him, literally, then why accept a plea deal? Tell Anne to go fuck herself. And the flip side of that coin is, if they did it because they felt that they had a weak case and they couldn't bury him, then why would Anne Taylor even entertain the situation? You know, who'd have thought the last fuck that Bryan Kohberger would get would be from Anne Taylor? Only kidding. I'm sure she'd done everything she could. But anyway, let's just go back into this quickly. So they said that they could secure a guilty verdict. As we reported, under the deal, Kohberger will plead guilty to 4 counts of murder, and in return, prosecutors will take the death penalty off the table. Prosecutors will recommend life in prison without the possibility of parole. A hearing is scheduled for Wednesday, and presumably that's when prosecutors and Kohberger will ask the judge to approve the plea deal. Kim says she wants the judge to delay making a decision so the families can figure out their next move. Now, the Gonsalves family that we'll get to in a second, they've done a post and they have kind of said, look, thank you for all the support that you've offered us, and if you want to ring Hitler and say fuck no, then you can do that on our behalf, and there's his number, and I'll bring that up on the screen. Let's have a quick look indeed at what the Gonsalves family said. And they kind of echo the sentiments of the Canodal family, and that is, I would like to clarify a couple of things. We did talk to the prosecution on Friday about the possibility of a plea deal, and it was a hard no from our family. It was very nonchalant and barely discussed, as the majority of the conversation was surrounding the upcoming trial. Nothing in our conversation prepared us for the next step. Sunday night, we received an email that sent us scrambling. We immediately jumped into panic mode and started making phone calls and sending emails. We met with the prosecution again today to reiterate our views on pushing for the death penalty. Unfortunately, all our efforts did not matter, despite them previously saying that they were doing this for the families, like knocking the house down. That was also for the families, to make sure that they didn't have to see it. Bollocks. They're hiding something, mate. You get the DoorDash person come up on the screen saying, yeah, that she's friends with old bad Santa, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, a few hours later, it's like, yeah, we need to we need to skate away from this yarbish. That's the feeling that you get in it. It just, why would both sides of this, the prosecution and the defense, simultaneously throw the towel in and go, yeah, fuck it, we're done? It was like the ending of The Faculty. Really good film. Got to the end, it was like they lost interest, just ended it. So, look, it says, we fought harder than anyone could ever imagine. Please do not argue or try to tell us that we should have done this or that. We gave it 200% for the last 2 years and 7 months. One day we will tell you all that we have really been through from day one. You will all be shocked. We fought a long battle, but we lost the war. We did gain an army of love that we know will always stand by us. We have so much love for each and every one of you. You gave us strength when we felt like we couldn't take another step, called us off the ledge when we were ready to wave the white flag, and most importantly, prayed for us when we were in utter despair and hopeless. So much love for all of you. And then they done this family statement here, which is, the death penalty is merely an illusion in the criminal justice system. When available, it serves as a bargaining tool for the state, and when rarely applied, it's never enforced due to a highly inefficient appellate process. The notion that someone can plead guilty to a crime and still face years of appellate delays reveals a systematic failure. The Latah County Prosecutor's Office treating of our family during this process is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. We questioned decisions early in the investigation. Why was the mayor commenting on the case? Why was the coroner speaking to the families? Why was an officer with less than 2 years' experience leading the investigation? Why was the University of Idaho involved when they declared it an isolated off-campus incident? Why was the university permitted to write a book about the incident while others were silenced under an overly broad order? As a result, we were branded adversaries. So it was no shock how the Latah County Prosecutor's Office mishandled the plea deal. They vaguely mentioned a possible deal on Friday without seeking our input and presented the plea on Sunday. Latah County should be ashamed of its prosecutor's office. 4 wonderful young people lost their lives, yet the victims' families were treated as opponents from the outset. We weren't even called about the plea. We received an email with a letter attached. That's how Latah County's prosecutor's office treats murder victims' families. Adding insult to injury, they're rushing the plea, giving families just 1 day to coordinate and appear at the courthouse for a plea on July 2nd. Very similar to the House situation, mate. Very similar to the House situation. Last minute, rush, bosh, bish, bosh, so nothing could be done about it. Knock it out, bury it. That's what this case has all been about. And that's why people are still sitting there now thinking, what just happened? Some people's heads still spinning on the top of their spine because this has happened so quick and don't make sense. Who do they think they are? After more than 2 years, it is how it concludes, with a secretive deal and a hurried effort to close the case without any input from the victims' families on the plea details. Our family is frustrated right now, and that will subside, and we will come together as always and deal with the reality that we face moving forward. Once again, we thank everyone for their thoughts and prayers. Basically, the Gonsalves family, everybody, they've just been fucked over. Everyone's been fucked over. You know, however much we've sat here and said we don't think that Bryan Kohberger is guilty, or he could potentially be innocent based on what we've seen, and we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll still stand by that. I'm going to apologise for it. The guy's got constitutional rights, and you should be proud and want to uphold them no matter what. And, you know, I think at one point Steve Gonsalves wanted him to go through the fucking system. The system to work properly, to find him guilty or not. But if it finds him guilty, to execute him. Now, the only person who... Well, I don't know who wins here. Who wins? Well, the people who potentially leaked everything and went against the gag order, whatever other shady shit was going on in the background that they don't want brought up in trial. This is about hiding stuff. It's the only thing that makes sense. Things being hidden, they don't want brought to light. Was Bryan Kohberger guilty? Who fucking knows? Who knows? I don't know. I don't know whether someone who isn't guilty would accept this plea, but I don't know, Bryan. I don't know him, but if he accepts it, then so be it. It is. And you could argue that if he is guilty of this crime, then he wins. And if there are things to hide from the prosecution, the FBI, whatever, then they win. But the family certainly don't. They've just got a big fuck you. Let me know down below what you think. And we will come together after or during this hearing. If it's live, I will go live and we will stream this hearing. If it's not, then as soon as we've got information from it, I'll come to you. Make sure you subscribe, like, and all that jazz. Mwah.